The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and fear, the kind that clings to your skin and burrows into your bones. I was 19, crouched behind a crumbling wall in the outskirts of Sarajevo, my military uniform soaked with sweat and mud, my hands trembling around a rifle I barely knew how to use. The world was screaming, artillery shells howling, glass shattering, and somewhere a woman's wail cutting through the chaos like a knife. I wasn't a soldier, not really. I was just a boy who'd signed up to protect my family, my city, my future. But my father's voice echoed in my head, louder than the explosions. "You look like a fool in that uniform. You'll get yourself killed for nothing." His words stung more than the shrapnel grazing my cheek. He'd mocked me, laughed in my face as I stood proud in my new uniform, ready to defend our home. But that day, as fighter jets roared over the church where we'd once prayed together, something changed. A truth buried beneath years of silence and shame came crashing into the light, and it would haunt me forever. War doesn't just tear apart cities. It rips open the seams of who you are, exposing the raw, bleeding truth of what you're capable of and what you're not. My story isn't just about survival. It's about a father and son, a church that stood like a fragile promise against the chaos, and a moment that redefined everything I thought I knew about courage, betrayal, and love. What would you do if the person you trusted most turned out to be hiding a secret that could destroy everything? What if the war you were fighting wasn't just on the battlefield, but in the heart of your own family? Stay with me, because by the end, you'll understand why those jets over the church changed more than just my life. They revealed a truth about war that no one dares to speak. Every war story carries a weight, a shadow of the human soul stretched to its breaking point. This one is mine, but it could be yours. It's the story of how fragile life is when the bombs start falling, how the survival instinct claws its way to the surface, and how anyone, yes, even you, could find themselves staring down the barrel of a choice that defines who you are. I'm sharing this because the truth matters, because the stories of those who lived through hell deserve to be heard. If you're ready to face that truth, hit that like button right now. It's not just a click. It's a signal that you want to uncover the raw reality of war, to honor the voices that history tries to bury. In the comments, write, "I want to hear the whole truth of this story." By doing so, you're joining a community that isn't afraid to look into the darkness, to feel the weight of what war does to the human heart. Thank you for having the courage to listen. What comes next will pull you deeper into a world of fire, faith, and secrets. A world where a father's scorn and a son's defiance collide under the shadow of fighter jets. Stay with me, because the truth is just beginning to unfold. My boots were too big, the uniform too stiff, scratching at my skin like it was trying to remind me I didn't belong in it. It was late spring 1992, and Sarajevo was already a city choking on its own fear. I stood in our small apartment, the one with the cracked plaster walls and the single window overlooking a street that used to hum with life. Vendors shouting, kids chasing stray dogs, old men playing chess under the linden trees. Now that street was a graveyard of shattered glass and abandoned carts, the air heavy with the distant rumble of mortars. I was adjusting the straps of my military pack, the weight of it pressing into my shoulders, when my father walked in. His eyes, sharp and gray like the steel of a knife, flicked over me. "You look ridiculous," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "Like a child playing dress-up in a war that'll chew you up and spit you out." I wanted to scream at him, to tell him I was doing this for us, for him, for Mama, for my little sister Anna, who hadn't smiled since the first sirens wailed. But I just clenched my jaw and kept my eyes on the floor, the shame burning hotter than the pride I'd felt when I enlisted. He wasn't wrong about the uniform. It hung loose on my frame, the olive green fabric swallowing my skinny arms. I was no soldier, not yet. I'd only signed up a week ago, driven by the stories of neighbors who'd lost everything. Homes burned, families torn apart. I thought joining the militia would make me a protector, a hero even. But standing there under my father's gaze, I felt like a fraud. He'd always been the strong one in our family, the one who fixed the leaky roof, who carried Anna on his shoulders when she was too tired to walk. He was a carpenter, his hands calloused from years of shaping wood into something beautiful. But now, Those hands just gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white, as if he was holding himself back from tearing the uniform off me. "You think you're saving us?" he spat. "You're throwing your life away. For what? A city that's already dead?" I wanted to argue, to tell him about the recruiter who'd come to our neighborhood, promising we could hold the line, keep the snipers and tanks at bay. I wanted to tell him about the fire in my chest when I thought of Anna hiding under her bed, or Mama praying silently every night, her rosary beads clicking like a countdown. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I remembered the day I signed up. The recruitment office was a damp basement, lit by a single flickering bulb. The man behind the desk, a grizzled veteran with a scar splitting his eyebrow, handed me the papers and a pen. "You're young," he said, not unkindly, "but youth is all we've got left." I signed my name, Marko Ivanovich, in a shaky scrawl, my heart pounding with something between fear and purpose. They gave me the uniform, a rifle, and a promise. Training would come later. For now, I was to report to a checkpoint on the edge of the city. That was it. No ceremony, no time to second guess. Just a pat on the shoulder and a warning to keep my head down. That night, I lay on the thin mattress in my room, the uniform folded beside me, its smell of starch and canvas filling the air. Anna crept in, her small frame barely making a sound. She was 12, all knees and elbows, her dark eyes too big for her face. "Are you going to die, Marko?" she whispered, clutching her stuffed rabbit, the one she'd had since she was 5. I wanted to laugh, to tell her no, of course not. But the truth was I didn't know. The war was a beast, unpredictable and ravenous. I'd heard stories, neighbors whispering about boys my age gunned down in the streets, their bodies left for days because no one dared retrieve them. "I'll come back," I told her, pulling her close. "I promise." But even as I said it, my father's words gnawed at me. A fool in a uniform. Was he right? Was I just a kid pretending to be something I wasn't? The next morning I left before dawn. Mama pressed a small cross into my hand, her fingers trembling. "God will watch over you," she said, her voice breaking. My father said nothing. He stood by the door, arms crossed, his silence heavier than any insult. I stepped into the street, the city still cloaked in the gray half-light of morning. Somewhere, a dog barked, and then a burst of gunfire silenced it. My heart thudded, but I kept walking, the rifle slung across my back, the uniform chafing my skin. I didn't know it then, but that walk was the beginning of everything, every scar, every secret, every moment that would lead me to that church, to the roar of jets overhead, and to a truth I wasn't ready to face. As I reached the checkpoint, a crumbling intersection guarded by sandbags and nervous boys like me, I heard the first explosion of the day. It was close, too close. The ground shook, and a plume of smoke rose from a building just a few streets away. My training was supposed to start that day, but war doesn't wait for lessons. A man, maybe 30, with a cigarette dangling from his lips, shoved a clip of ammunition into my hands. "Stay low, kid," he said, "and don't trust anyone." His eyes flicked to my uniform, and for a moment I thought I saw pity. I wanted to ask what he meant, but another blast swallowed my words, and I was thrown into the chaos, into a world where my father's mockery was the least of my worries, and where the weight of the uniform was nothing compared to the weight of what I was about to learn. The smoke from that explosion lingered in the air like a ghost, choking the breath out of me as I huddled behind the sandbags. My fingers fumbled with the ammunition clip, slick with sweat, clicking it into place with a sound that seemed too loud in the sudden hush that followed the blast. The man with the cigarette, his name was Luka, I learned later, crouched beside me, his eyes scanning the rooftops across the street. "Snipers," he muttered, spitting the word like a curse. "They love the mornings. Picks off the new ones like you." I nodded, my mouth dry, pretending I understood. But inside I was a storm of panic. The uniform felt heavier now, not just cloth and straps, but a target painted on my back. I thought of my father's face, that mocking curl of his lip. "You'll get yourself killed for nothing." His words were a loop in my mind, playing over the distant crack of gunfire that echoed through the city like thunder rolling in from the hills. We were at the edge of Grbavica, a neighborhood that had once been alive with markets and laughter, now a labyrinth of rubble and fear. The checkpoint was nothing more than a barricade of overturned cars and concrete blocks, manned by a ragtag group of us, boys, really, pulled from schools and jobs to hold back an enemy we barely comprehended. The Serb forces were pressing in, their artillery pounding the city day and night, turning buildings into skeletons of steel and stone. I'd heard the radio broadcasts, the pleas for help that went unanswered, the world watching as Sarajevo bled. But hearing it and living it were worlds apart. Luka handed me a cigarette, though I didn't smoke. "Calms the nerves," he said. I took it, the paper trembling between my lips as he lit it with a match that flared bright in the dim light. The first drag burned my throat, but it grounded me, pulled me back from the edge of terror. That's when the shadows started moving. At first I thought it was a trick of the smoke, shapes darting between the ruins of a bakery across the way. But Luka tensed, his rifle coming up smooth and sure. "Incoming," he whispered, and the words sent ice through my veins. I peered over the sandbags, my heart slamming against my ribs. There they were, figures in dark uniforms, creeping forward, using the debris for cover. Enemies, real ones, not the faceless monsters from stories. They were close, maybe 50 meters, their movements careful, predatory. One of them raised a weapon, and the world narrowed to that single point. I aimed my rifle, the stock cold against my cheek, my finger hovering over the trigger. "Pull it," I told myself. "This is why you're here." But doubt crept in, slimy and insistent. What if I missed? What if they saw me first? My father's voice again. A fool in a uniform. I hesitated, and in that moment, Luka fired. The crack was deafening, and one of the shadows jerked back, crumpling to the ground. Chaos erupted. Bullets whined past us, chipping the concrete, sending sparks flying. I ducked, my body reacting before my mind could catch up. "Shoot, damn it!" Luka yelled, reloading with practiced ease. I forced myself up, squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked in my hands, the recoil jarring my shoulder. I didn't know if I hit anything, probably not, but the act of firing shattered something inside me. The fear didn't vanish. It transformed, sharpening my senses. I could smell the cordite, taste the dust, hear the shouts in a language that was both familiar and alien. We traded fire for what felt like hours, though it was probably minutes. Another of our group, a kid named Dragon with acne-scarred cheeks, cried out as a bullet grazed his arm, blood blooming dark on his sleeve. I tore a strip from my shirt, my uniform, now christened with dirt and sweat, and bound it tight, my hands steady despite the adrenaline. As the enemy fell back, retreating into the ruins, a strange calm settled over me. We'd held the line for now. Luka clapped me on the back, his grin fierce. "Not bad for a rookie. You might survive yet." But as I sat there catching my breath, the doubt lingered. Why had I hesitated? Was it fear or something deeper? My father's scorn echoing in my soul, making me question every choice. I thought of home, of Anna's wide eyes, Mama's cross in my pocket. I pulled it out, the metal warm from my body heat, and clutched it like a lifeline. But even faith felt fragile here, in this place where God seemed to have turned away. Later that day, as the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows over the checkpoint, we shared what little food we had, stale bread and a can of beans passed around like communion. The talk turned to families, to why we were fighting. Dragan spoke of his sister, taken by soldiers weeks ago, her fate unknown. Luka mentioned a wife in the hills, hiding with their infant son. I stayed quiet at first, but when they asked, I told them about my father. "He thinks I'm an idiot for this," I said, gesturing to the uniform. They laughed, but it was hollow. "Fathers," Luka said, shaking his head. "Mine was the same, until he wasn't." His words hung there, cryptic, stirring something uneasy in me. What did he mean? But before I could ask, a radio crackled to life. Orders barking through the static. Reinforcements needed at the old church in the center. St. Michael's, the one where my family had attended Mass every Sunday, where I'd been baptized, where secrets were whispered in confessionals. I volunteered, my voice steadier than I felt. As we moved out, weaving through back alleys choked with debris, the city felt like a living thing, wounded and angry. Sniper fire cracked occasionally, forcing us to dive for cover. My mind raced ahead to the church, its spire a landmark against the skyline, now pocked with shell holes. What waited there? More fighting, more blood? or something that would crack open the facade of my life. Little did I know, as we approached, that the shadows of doubt were just the beginning, that beneath the mockery, my father harbored a truth that would thunder down like those jets, changing everything. The journey to the church took us through neighborhoods I barely recognized. Buildings I'd played in as a child were now husks, windows empty, eyes staring blankly. We passed a playground, swings creaking in the wind, a child's shoe abandoned in the dirt. It hit me then, the sheer waste of it all. Why were we doing this to each other? Neighbors turned enemies overnight, lines drawn by politicians in far-off places. My uniform chafed, a constant reminder of the side I'd chosen or been forced into. Luca led the way, his steps sure, but I noticed how he scanned every corner, every rooftop. Trust no one, he'd said. Was that the key to survival? Paranoia as armor? We arrived at St. Michael's as dusk fell, the sky bruising purple. The church stood defiant, its stone walls scarred but intact. Inside it was a refuge of sorts. Civilians huddled in pews, priests murmuring prayers. But the air was tense, whispers of an impending attack. I took up position near the altar, rifle at the ready, my mind drifting to memories of simpler times. Easter services, the scent of incense, my father's hand on my shoulder as we knelt together. Where was that man now? The one who'd taught me to carve wood, to fish in the river? Replaced by bitterness, by mockery? Or was there more? A hidden wound from his own past, perhaps from the old wars that scarred our land before this one. Night deepened, and with it came the first probes, shadowy figures testing our defenses. We repelled them, the church echoing with gunfire, stained glass shattering like brittle dreams. In the lulls, I talked with a priest, Father Nikolai, his face lined with exhaustion. War reveals us, he said, his voice soft. The heroes, the cowards, the secrets we bury. His words stirred unease. Did he know something about my family? About my father? But before I could press, alarms blared, enemy armor approaching. Tanks rumbling through the streets, their treads grinding stone to dust. We braced, hearts pounding, as the first shells whistled in. In that moment, pinned down in the sacred space, doubt gave way to resolve. I fired into the night, each shot a defiance against the chaos, against my father's words. But as the battle raged, a radio message crackled. Hold the line at all costs. Reinforcements inbound, air support, jets. The word sent a chill through me. What did it mean for us, for the city? Little did I know those thundering wings would bring not just salvation, but revelation. A truth about my father that would shatter the world I knew. The fight intensified. Bullets ricocheting off stone, screams piercing the air. I saw a comrade fall, his body crumpling beside me, life ebbing in a pool of red. Horror gripped me, but I pushed it down, reloading, firing, surviving. Hour after hour we held, the church a fortress of faith and fire. As dawn approached, the roar grew. Not tanks, but engines in the sky. Fighter jets, streaking low, their thunder shaking the very foundations. But in that chaos, amid the explosions and cries, a figure emerged from the shadows, one I recognized all too well. My father, here, in the heart of the storm. What was he doing? The question burned as bright as the flares lighting the night. Yet as the jets thundered overhead, unleashing their payload on the enemy lines, I glimpsed something in his eyes, not mockery, but fear. And something else, regret. The pieces were falling into place, but the puzzle was far from complete. The war was teaching me lessons in blood and ash, and the deepest cuts were yet to come. The jet's thunder faded into a ringing in my ears, the ground still vibrating from the impacts as smoke billowed up from the enemy positions outside the church. Shards of stained glass crunched under my boots as I staggered forward, my rifle hanging limp in my hands, the barrel hot from the endless barrage. Father Nikolai was shouting orders, his cassock torn and smeared with dust, directing the wounded to the back pews where makeshift bandages were being torn from altar cloths. The air inside St. Michael's was thick with the acrid scent of explosives and blood, the once sacred space now a battlefield triage. My eyes locked on the figure I'd glimpsed amid the chaos. My father, hunched behind an overturned confessional, his face streaked with grime, a pistol clutched in his trembling hand. He wasn't in uniform, Just his old work clothes, the carpenter's apron still tied around his waist, tools peeking from the pockets. What was he doing here? How had he gotten past the lines? The questions burned hotter than the fires raging outside. I crossed the nave in a daze, stepping over debris and bodies, some still, some writhing in agony. "Papa!" My voice cracked, barely audible over the moans and the distant crackle of flames. He looked up, his gray eyes widening in shock, then narrowing with something I couldn't place. Relief? Guilt? He grabbed my arm, pulling me down beside him, his grip iron-strong despite the years. "Marco, you idiot!" he whispered harshly, his breath ragged. "What are you doing here?" The irony hit me like a slap. Me? I was the one in uniform, posted to defend this very spot. But before I could retort, another shell whistled in, slamming into the courtyard outside. The explosion shook the walls, dust raining from the vaulted ceiling like gray snow. We ducked, his body shielding mine instinctively, a father's reflex that twisted the knife of confusion deeper. As the dust settled, I pushed him away, anger surging through the fear. "You mocked me for this," I hissed, gesturing to the uniform now torn at the sleeve. Blood, mine or someone else's, staining the fabric. "Called me a fool. And now you're here with a gun? Explain yourself." His face hardened, lines etched deeper by the flickering light of a nearby candle stub. He glanced around, ensuring no one was close enough to hear over the chaos. Luca was across the aisle, tending to Dragan's wound, his back to us. Father Nikolai was praying over a dying man, his words a murmur of Latin. "Not now," my father muttered. "Later, just stay alive." But I wouldn't let it go. The war had stripped away patience, left only raw need for truth. "No, now, why are you here?" He sighed, a sound heavy with years of unspoken burdens, and leaned back against the confessional's splintered wood. "I've been helping," he said finally, his voice low. "Not like you, running into the fire, quietly. Supplies, information. The resistance has networks, Marco. Civilians like me, we move in the shadows." I stared at him, the words sinking in like lead. Resistance? My father, the man who'd spent his life hammering nails and shaping beams, involved in something clandestine? It didn't fit. He'd always preached caution, staying out of politics, keeping our heads down. "But you laughed at me," I pressed, the hurt bubbling up. "Said I'd die for nothing." His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw the crack in his armor. Tears glistening, unshed. "I was trying to protect you," he admitted. "If you stayed home, you'd be safe. But this," he waved at the church, the war beyond, "it's bigger than us. I couldn't let you face it alone." The revelation hit like a mortar round, fragments embedding in my heart. All those late nights he'd disappear, claiming work in the shop. The hushed conversations with neighbors I'd dismissed as gossip. Was he a spy? A smuggler? The pieces from my childhood rearranged themselves, the scars on his hands I'd thought were from tools, perhaps from something more dangerous. The way he'd tense at news of the old Yugoslav wars, changing the radio station mid-sentence. Had he been involved then too? A hidden past, buried under the facade of a simple carpenter. But why hide it from me? From us? As if reading my thoughts, he continued. "Your grandfather, he fought in the partisans during World War II. Died for it. I swore I'd never let that happen to my family. But when this started, I couldn't stand by. Joined a group moving food, medicine through the tunnels under the city. Tunnels. I'd heard rumors, old sewer lines repurposed by the resistance to bypass blockades. Dangerous, collapsing passages where one wrong step meant burial alive. The thought of him crawling through that darkness, risking everything while mocking my choice to fight openly. It fueled a mix of admiration and rage. "You could have told me," I whispered. "We could have done this together." He shook his head. "No, you're my son. I wanted you out of it." But here we were, together in the belly of the beast, the church our fragile sanctuary. Outside, the jets had done their work. The enemy advance stalled, but scouts reported reinforcements massing. We had minutes, maybe hours before the next wave. In that brief lull, we shared a moment of uneasy alliance. He handed me extra ammunition from his apron pocket, clips he'd smuggled in. "Take it," he said, "and forgive an old man his fears." I nodded, pocketing them, the metal cold against my skin. But forgiveness? That would come later, if we survived. Luca called out then, waving me over. Marco! We need you on the roof. Spotters. I stood, glancing back at my father. Stay hidden, I told him, the role reversal strange on my tongue. He nodded, melting back into the shadows of the confessional. Climbing the narrow stairs to the bell tower, my mind raced. The uniform felt different now, not a fool's costume, but a badge of shared burden. From the roof, the city sprawled below, a tapestry of fire and ruin. Sarajevo burned, pockets of flame dotting the landscape like hellish stars. Dragan was already there, binoculars pressed to his eyes, his wounded arm slung. They're coming again, he said grimly. Tanks this time. My stomach nodded. We had anti-tank weapons, smuggled perhaps by men like my father, but they were few. As I scanned the horizon, a new sound built. Not jets, but helicopters, whirring blades slicing the night. Allies or more death from above? Down below, in the sanctuary, I knew my father was watching, whispering prayers or plans. The whispers of his secret life echoed in my ears, a mystery unraveling thread by thread. But the war waited for no revelations. Gunfire erupted anew, pulling me back to the fight. I fired from the tower, each shot a punctuation to the unfolding drama. Yet, as the battle reignited, a darker shadow loomed, a betrayal brewing in the ranks. One that would test the fragile bond between father and son, and lead us deeper into the heart of the storm. The hours blurred into a frenzy of reloads and retreats. Wounded piled up, the priests turning confessors into medics. My father emerged from hiding, helping where he could, binding wounds with steady hands, his carpenter's precision saving lives. I caught glimpses of him between volleys, our eyes meeting in silent understanding. But doubt crept back. Was his story true? Or was there more? A deeper secret tied to the church itself? Father Nikolai seemed to know him, their nods too familiar. As dawn broke, pale and unforgiving, a ceasefire whisper spread. Temporary, fragile. We gathered in the nave, exhausted souls clinging to hope. My father pulled me aside again, his voice urgent. There's something else you need to know, he began. But a shout interrupted, enemy parley, a white flag approaching. The tension thickened, the sanctuary holding its breath. What came next would shatter illusions, expose lies, and bind us in ways I never imagined. The war's cruel hand was turning the page, and the deepest wounds were those carved by truth. The white flag fluttered like a ghost in the pale dawn light, held aloft by a lone figure approaching the church gates. He was unarmed, or so it seemed, hands raised, his uniform muddied and torn, a Serb insignia glinting on his collar. The ceasefire held, tenuous as a spider's web, the air still humming with the aftermath of the jet's fury. From the bell tower, I watched, my rifle trained on him, finger itching on the trigger. Down in the nave, my father had frozen mid-sentence, his unfinished revelation hanging between us like smoke. There's something else, he'd said, his voice trailing off as the shout echoed through the sanctuary. Now we all waited, breaths held, the wounded stirring uneasily on the blood-stained floors. Father Nikolai stepped forward, his cross held high, a symbol of neutrality in a world gone mad. What do you want? He called out, his tone steady, despite the exhaustion carving hollows under his eyes. The enemy soldier stopped just beyond the gates, his face gaunt, eyes shadowed by a helmet pushed back on his head. Parley, he replied in accented Bosnian, his voice carrying across the rubble-strewn courtyard. We propose a trade. Hostages for safe passage. Murmurs rippled through our ranks. Hostages? We had none, or did we? Luca, beside me now on the roof, lowered his binoculars. It's a trick, he muttered. They want to flush us out. But orders came crackling over the radio. Hear them out. Desperation breeds strange bedfellows, and our ammunition was low, the church walls cracking under the strain of repeated assaults. I descended the stairs, my boots echoing in the hush, drawn back to the nave where my father stood, his pistol hidden but ready. As the soldier was allowed inside, frisked thoroughly, his eyes darting over our defenses, tension coiled tighter. He was young, maybe my age, his hands calloused like a farmer's, not a killer's. Or perhaps that's what war did, turned plowmen into predators. Father Nikolai led him to the altar, where a makeshift table had been set with a map and a lantern. Speak, the priest said. The soldier unfolded a crumpled paper, names scrawled in hasty ink. These civilians, your people, are in our custody. Women, children from the nearby village. Release them for information and a 2-hour truce. The names meant nothing to me at first, but as he read them aloud, a chill slithered down my spine. One was familiar, Elena Petrovich, Anna's schoolteacher. Another, old Mr. Kovac, our neighbor. How had they been captured? When? My father's face paled, a subtle shift I might have missed if I hadn't been watching him. He edged closer, his hand brushing mine in warning. "Don't!" he whispered, but I couldn't hold back. "How do we know you're telling the truth?" I demanded, stepping forward. The soldier's eyes met mine, a flicker of something. Pity? Amusement? "Proof," he said, pulling a small envelope from his pocket. Inside photographs, blurred but unmistakable. Elena bound, her face bruised. Kovac slumped against a wall. And then a third. My heart stopped. It was a picture of our apartment building, taken recently, with a note clipped. "We know where they hide." The implication hit like a gut punch. Spies, informants in our midst. The sanctuary erupted in whispers, suspicion poisoning the air. Who could have betrayed us? Luka scanned the faces around us, his trust fracturing. Dragan clutched his wounded arm, eyes wide. Father Nikolai took the photos, his hands steady. "What information do you offer?" The soldier leaned in, voice dropping. "Tunnel routes, your supply lines. We know them. Close them off unless you agree." Tunnels again. My father's domain. I turned to him, questions burning in my gaze. He avoided my eyes, busying himself with adjusting a bandage on a nearby wounded man. But I saw the sweat beading on his forehead, the slight tremor in his fingers. Was this connected? Had his help been compromised? The negotiation dragged on, minutes ticking like bombs. We demanded proof of life, radio contact with the hostages. The soldier complied, patching through on a handheld device. Elena's voice came crackling over the static, weak but alive. "Please. The children are scared." It tore at me, visions of Anna flashing in my mind. We couldn't refuse. Terms were set. Release at the river bridge, 1 hour hence. Truce until noon. As the soldier left, white flag high, a heavy silence fell. Father Nikolai blessed the deal, but doubt festered. "We must prepare," Luka said, rallying us, "in case it's a trap." I pulled my father aside, into the dim alcove of a side chapel, candles flickering like accusatory eyes. "The tunnels," I hissed. "They know. Is this your doing?" His face crumpled, age lines deepening. "No, Marco, but I fear I've been followed." Last run, I sensed eyes on me. He confessed more then, the words tumbling out in a rush. The resistance group, he wasn't just a courier. He was a coordinator, mapping routes, coordinating drops. But lately leaks. Missing shipments. Dead comrades. "I thought I could keep it from you," he said, his voice breaking. "Protect you? Protect me? By mocking my choice? Pushing me away while he danced with death in the dark?" Anger surged, but beneath it, fear. For him, for us. We moved out under the truce, a small team to the bridge. Me, Luka, Dragan, and my father insisting on coming, his pistol tucked away. The city was eerily quiet, the sun climbing, casting long shadows over craters and barbed wire. Birds sang, oblivious to the madness. At the bridge, arched over the Miljacka River, swollen with spring rains, debris floating like lost souls, we waited. The enemy appeared on the far bank, hostages in tow, 10 figures shuffling forward. Elena, Kovac, children clutching hands. My breath caught. It seemed real. But as they crossed, a child's cry pierced the air. Then gunfire from our side. No, sniper from a rooftop. Enemy or rogue. Chaos exploded. Hostages scattered, diving for cover. Luka fired back, Dragan screaming as his wound reopened. I grabbed a child, pulling her behind a pillar, my uniform soaked in river spray. My father charged forward, exposed, grabbing Kovac. "Papa, no!" I yelled. A bullet whizzed past, grazing his shoulder. He fell, blood blooming. I ran to him, dragging him back, heart pounding. "Why?" I demanded, pressing on the wound. He gasped. "Had to redeem." Redeem what? The question hung as the truce shattered, both sides unleashing hell. We retreated, hostages in tow, most saved, but 2 lost in the crossfire. Back at the church, medics, such as they were, patched him up. Father Nikolai hovered, his eyes knowing. "Your father has carried much," he said softly. "From the old days." Old days? Another layer. As my father rested, fitful in pain, I pieced it together. His mockery wasn't just fear, it was guilt. From a past betrayal? A secret that echoed through generations? The war was unearthing bones long buried, but the enemy regrouped, shells whistling anew. Jets thundered overhead once more, our salvation and curse. In the roar, my father stirred, grabbing my hand. "The church, there's a reason we're here." His words, cryptic, pulled me deeper into the mystery. As bombs fell, the sanctuary trembled, revealing cracks not just in stone, but in the facade of our lives. The twist was coming, sharp and unforgiving, binding father and son in blood and truth. The church shuddered under the renewed barrage, stones groaning like wounded giants as shells exploded in the courtyard, sending tremors through the foundation. Dust cascaded from the rafters, coating us in a fine gray veil, and the jets roared overhead again, their afterburners painting the sky in streaks of fire. I knelt beside my father, his shoulder wound seeping through the hasty bandage, his face pale but determined. "The church, there's a reason we're here," he repeated, his voice a rasp over the din. I leaned closer, shielding him from falling debris, my uniform caked in mud and blood, the weight of it now a familiar anchor in the storm. "What reason, Papa? Tell me." His eyes, clouded with pain, flicked to Father Nikolai, who was nearby, directing the defense with a calm that bordered on the divine. The priest nodded subtly, as if giving permission, and my father gripped my arm, pulling me even nearer. "It started long before this war," he began, his words tumbling out between gritted teeth. "Before you were born, even before the last troubles in the 70s, your grandfather, my father, wasn't just a partisan. He was a guardian. During World War II, when the Nazis swept through, he hid something here, in St. Michael's, documents, artifacts, proof of atrocities, names of collaborators, treasures from the old synagogue that was burned down. He buried them under the altar, in a vault only a few knew about. The priests protected the secret, passing it down. When the communists came after, they sealed it tighter. But I inherited the key." He fumbled in his pocket, producing a small, rusted iron key, its teeth worn from time. I stared at it, the metal cold in my palm as he pressed it into my hand. A key? To what end? But the pieces clicked. His involvement in the resistance, the tunnels leading here, his insistence on coming to the church. The jets thundered closer, their shadows flickering through the shattered windows, and a massive explosion rocked the building, cracking the floor tiles near the altar. Screams echoed, more wounded, civilians scrambling for cover. Luca shouted from the doorway, "They're breaching the walls!" "Hold the line." I wanted to run to the fight, but my father's story held me captive. "Why now?" I demanded. "Why tell me this?" He coughed, blood flecking his lips. Internal injuries, perhaps. "Because they're after it, the enemy. Not just territory. Rumors spread. Someone talked. A traitor in the old guard. They want the documents to rewrite history, to cover their kin's sins from the war. If they get it, they'll destroy evidence of massacres, claim innocence. Our family, we're tied to it. Your grandfather died protecting it. I mocked you, Marco, to keep you away, to spare you this curse. But now, with the jets, it's a sign. We have to protect it." His words ignited a fire in me, mingling with the adrenaline of battle. The uniform, once a symbol of my defiance, now felt like a mantle passed down through generations. I glanced at the altar, its marble surface scarred by shrapnel, the crucifix above hanging askew. Under there, a vault. Father Nikolai approached, his robes swirling in the draft from a breached wall. "It's true," he confirmed, his voice steady. "I've guarded it since my ordination. But the shelling, it's weakening the seals. If the church falls, it's lost." Outside, the roar intensified, tanks grinding closer, infantry advancing under the cover of smoke. Our reinforcements were sparse, the jets providing air support but unable to stop the ground assault. Dragan fired from a window, his cries mixing with the rat-tat-tat of machine guns. I helped my father to his feet, slinging his arm over my shoulder, the key burning in my pocket. "Show me," I said. We moved toward the altar, the sanctuary a whirlwind of motion, men reloading, women tending the injured, children huddled in fear. Another jet pass shook the building, dislodging a chandelier that crashed down, shattering crystal like brittle bones. We reached the altar, Father Nikolai lifting the heavy cloth to reveal a trapdoor, concealed by intricate carvings. "Here," he said, pointing to a lock hidden in the stone. My hands trembled as I inserted the key. It fit perfectly, turning with a grind of ancient mechanisms. The door creaked open, revealing steep stairs descending into darkness. The air cool and musty, carrying the scent of earth and old paper. We descended, my father leaning heavily on me, Father Nikolai lighting the way with a flashlight scavenged from supplies. The vault was small, walls lined with shelves of sealed boxes, maps yellowed with age, ledgers bound in leather. In the center, a chest, wooden, reinforced with iron bands. "That's it," my father whispered. "The heart of it all." But as we approached, the ground above trembled violently, a direct hit. Dirt sifted from the ceiling, and shouts filtered down. "They're inside!" Luca's voice panicked. I had to go back up, but leaving this unprotected. "Take what you can," Father Nikolai urged. We evacuate through the tunnels. Tunnels, again, my father's secret paths, connecting the church to the underground network. I grabbed a satchel from the shelves, stuffing in documents, faded photographs of executions, lists of names, gold stars of David wrapped in cloth. Each item a weight of history, a testament to horrors past and present. My father slumped against the wall, his wound worsening. "Go, Marco, I'll hold here." But I refused, hoisting him up. Together. As we climbed back, the battle raged above. Gunfire in the nave, screams of hand-to-hand combat. Emerging chaos greeted us, enemy soldiers pouring through a breach, our men falling back. I fired one-handed, supporting my father, the satchel slung across my chest. In the melee, I spotted the traitor, old Mr. Kovac, the hostage we'd rescued, now pointing out positions to the invaders. Betrayal, sharp as a blade. He met my eyes, guilt flashing before a bullet from Luca felled him. But the damage was done. We retreated to the side chapel, Father Nikolai opening another hidden door to the tunnels. Civilians first, then the wounded. My father insisted on last, but I dragged him in. As we fled into the dark, the church above echoed with final stands, jets thundering in futile cover. The tunnels were a maze, damp walls, echoing drips, our flashlight beams cutting through the gloom. My father's breathing labored, each step a agony. The mockery. "Forgive me," he gasped. "I was afraid you'd end like grandfather, buried with secrets." Tears stung my eyes, the uniform chafing but empowering. We emerged hours later in a ruined warehouse on the city's edge, allies waiting. But the war wasn't over. The secrets in my satchel a new burden, the jet's thunder a reminder of fragile victories. Yet, as we caught our breath, a radio crackled. "Cease fire negotiations." Hope flickered, but deeper mysteries lingered. Kovac's betrayal, tied to my family's past? The vault's full contents? The story unraveled further, pulling us toward a confrontation that would echo the title's promise. The radio's static hiss cut through the dim light of the warehouse. A cavernous shell on the outskirts of Sarajevo, its walls pocked with bullet holes and echoing with the distant thud of artillery that never truly ceased. We huddled there, a ragged band of survivors, civilians clutching what little they carried, soldiers like me and Luca nursing wounds, Father Nikolai murmuring blessings over the group. My father leaned against a crate, his shoulder bandaged anew by a medic who'd joined us in the tunnels, his face ashen, but his eyes sharp with unresolved pain. The satchel of documents hung heavy at my side, its contents a ticking bomb of history that could ignite old feuds anew. "Ceasefire talks in progress," the voice on the radio repeated, tinny and hopeful, broadcasting from some underground station loyal to our side. Whispers spread among us. Could it be true? A pause in the madness? But I knew better. War's respites were illusions, fragile as glass under boot heels. I knelt beside my father, the key still in my pocket, a talisman of our family's hidden legacy. "Kovac," I said softly, the name bitter on my tongue. "He betrayed us. But why? And how is he connected to us?" My father's gaze drifted to the satchel, then back to me, the uniform on my back a bridge between us now, not a divide. He drew a shaky breath, the air in the warehouse thick with the smell of damp concrete and unwashed bodies. Kovac! He was your grandfather's comrade in the partisans. They fought together, hid those artifacts side by side. But after the war, when the communists hunted down loose ends, Kovac turned. Sold out a few to save his skin. Grandfather never forgave, but he spared him. Family ties, distant cousins through marriage. I learned it young, swore to watch him. When this war started, I suspected he'd flip again. That's why I was at the church, to protect the vault from him. The revelation twisted in my gut, a knot of anger and sorrow. Kovac, our neighbor, the man who'd shared bread with us, played cards with Mama, a traitor twice over. His pointing finger in the church, guiding the enemy, now made sense. Not random betrayal, but targeted, seeking the vault's secrets to barter for his life. And the mockery? I pressed, my voice low to avoid ears around us. Was that part of watching? He winced, not just from the wound. Partly. I pushed you away to keep you from the shadows I walked. But also, shame. I mocked your uniform because I envied your courage, the open fight. Mine was always hidden, cowardly in a way. Cowardly? The man who'd crawled through tunnels, risked execution for supplies. I shook my head, but before I could respond, Luca approached, his face grim. Scouts report enemy movement. The ceasefire might hold, but they're probing. We need to move the group to safer ground, back toward the city center. Ironically, St. Michael's is rubble, but Allied lines are reforming there. Reluctantly, we mobilized, a slow procession through the bombed-out streets, the sun dipping low, casting elongated shadows that danced like specters. My father insisted on walking, though I supported him, the satchel bouncing against my hip with each step. Father Nikolai led, cross in hand, a beacon for the weary, as we navigated the ruins, overturned vehicles, craters filled with rainwater reflecting the fiery sky. Memories flooded me. This path, I'd patrolled it days ago, rifle ready, doubt heavy. Now, with my father's truth unfolding, the uniform felt earned, forged in fire and secrets. We paused at a crossroads, scouts fanning out. That's when the first sign of trouble came, a flare arcing high, illuminating the dusk. Ambush? Dragan muttered, his arm still slung, but no shots followed. Instead, a voice called out, neutral, a UN observer, blue helmet glinting. Hold! Negotiators en route. The ceasefire was real, at least for now. We were escorted to a neutral zone, a schoolyard fortified with sandbags, where aid workers distributed water and rations. My father was seen by a doctor, stitches reinforcing his wound. In the relative safety, he continued his tale, voice stronger with the morphine's edge. The vault's contents, more than documents. There's a ledger naming collaborators from 44, including Kovac's father. If exposed, it ruins families, stirs vendettas. Kovac wanted it destroyed. But grandfather added something else, a map to hidden arms caches from the war, usable now. That's why the enemy hunted it, to arm themselves or deny us. Arms? The satchel suddenly felt explosive. I opened it slightly, glimpsing the map, faded ink on parchment, markings in code. Father Nikolai joined us, his presence calming. Your grandfather entrusted me with the code. We can decode it, bolster our defenses. But as we huddled over it, a shadow fell, another figure approaching, hooded against the chill. It was Elena, the teacher we'd rescued, her face drawn. Marco, she said, urgency in her tone. Kovac! Before he died, he whispered to me. Said your father wasn't telling all, something about a deal gone wrong. Doubt resurfaced, a venomous whisper. I turned to my father, but he waved it off. Lies to sow discord, Kovac's last spite. Yet his eyes avoided mine. Was there more? The night deepened, the ceasefire holding uneasily, patrols circling. We rested in shifts, my mind racing through threads of treason, grandfather's fight, father's shadows, Kovac's betrayal. The uniform chafed less now, a skin I'd grown into. Dawn broke with a rumble. Not shells, but trucks arriving, negotiators in tow. Hope stirred, but so did tension. As talks began in a tent, I stood guard, rifle ready. Then, the betrayal unfolded. A sniper's crack, not at us, but at the enemy delegate. Chaos erupted, fingers pointing. Our side, theirs. In the confusion, Elena pulled me aside. Kovac said your father made a deal in the old war, traded info for safety. That's why he mocked you. Guilt. My world tilted. I confronted him away from the fray. Is it true? He slumped, the truth spilling. Once, to save your mother, pregnant with you. I gave minor intel. Haunted me ever since. The mockery, a mask for his own shame, projecting onto me, but forgiveness brewed amid the pain. Jets thundered overhead again, enforcing the truce, their roar a symphony of power. We were ordered back to the church ruins for a handover. There, under the shattered spire, the final threads would weave or snap. As we approached St. Michael's remnants, smoke still curling, the jets circled low, thunderous guardians. My father's secret fully bared, our bond reforged in understanding. But a greater twist awaited, echoing through the rubble, pulling us toward resolution. The remnants of St. Michael's loomed before us like the bones of a fallen giant. The spire that had once pierced the sky, now a jagged stump, silhouetted against the fading light of day. Smoke curled lazily from the rubble, mingling with the acrid scent of charred wood and gunpowder that permeated the air, a constant reminder of the night's fury. Jets continued to circle overhead, their thunderous engines a low growl that vibrated through my chest, enforcing the uneasy ceasefire with the threat of renewed devastation. I supported my father as we approached, his steps faltering but resolute, the wound in his shoulder a throbbing ache he bore with gritted teeth. The uniform on my back, once a point of contention, now united us in purpose, its fabric stiff with dried blood and dirt, a testament to the battles we'd shared. Around us, the group moved cautiously, Luca scanning the horizons, Father Nikolai clutching his cross, Elena herding the children with quiet reassurances. The schoolyard negotiations had bought us time, but trust was a luxury we couldn't afford. As we entered the church's skeletal frame, stepping over toppled pews and shattered stone, a hush fell over the scene. Allied forces had secured the perimeter, blue-helmeted UN observers mingling with our militia, their presence a fragile barrier against resurgence. A handover was underway, prisoners exchanged, medics tending to the newly arrived wounded. But my focus was on the altar, or what remained of it. A cracked marble slab amidst the debris, the trapdoor to the vault barely concealed by fallen masonry. My father's revelation still echoed in my mind. His deal in the old war, trading information to save Mama and unborn me, the guilt that had festered into mockery of my own choices. I did it for you, he'd said, his voice cracking in the tent. To give you a life without shadows. But shadows were all we had now, lengthening as the sun dipped lower. We made our way to the altar, Father Nikolai clearing a path with solemn determination. The vault may have held, he murmured, kneeling to shift rubble. My heart pounded as I helped, the satchel at my side already heavy with what we'd salvaged, but knowing more might lie below. The key in my pocket felt like a burning coal. As we lifted the door, miraculously intact amid the destruction, a cool draft wafted up, carrying the musty scent of secrets preserved. Descending once more, flashlight beams piercing the gloom, we found the chamber partially collapsed. Shelves buckled, boxes spilled, but the central chest unscathed, as if guarded by some divine hand. My father slumped against the wall, watching as I unlocked it anew, revealing additional ledgers, more maps, even a small cache of gold coins stamped with pre-war insignias, relics that could fund resistance or indict the guilty. But as I rifled through, a folded letter caught my eye, yellowed paper with my grandfather's handwriting. I unfolded it carefully, the words a bridge across generations. To my son, if I fall, beware the blood debt. Kovac's kin owe us, but betrayal runs deep. The map leads to arms, but also to truth. Our family's role in the purges. Purges, my father sighed, reading over my shoulder. He never told me all. During the war, grandfather wasn't just hiding artifacts. He executed collaborators. Kovac's father was one, but spared at the last, a mercy that bred resentment. The threads tightened. Kovac's betrayal not just opportunism, but vengeance, a cycle of grudge spanning decades. I felt the weight of it, The uniform suddenly a chain linking me to atrocities past, my enlistment an unwitting continuation. Above, voices raised, the handover turning tense. We hurried up, sealing the vault behind us. In the nave's ruins, enemy delegates argued with ours, fingers jabbing at maps, the jet's roar underscoring threats. Luca pulled me aside. They're demanding artifacts, claim their cultural heritage. Cultural? More like leverage. Elena hovered nearby, her earlier words lingering, Kovacs' dying accusation. But now, with the letter, it rang truer. My father's deal perhaps tied to that mercy. A compromise that saved lives but stained honor. As tensions peaked, a jet streaked low, shaking the ground, a show of force that silenced the bickering. My father stepped forward, despite his wound, addressing the group. "The past is buried here," he declared, voice steady. "Let it stay." But an enemy officer sneered, "We know what's below. Hand it over, or the truce ends." The standoff thickened, rifles twitching. In that moment, I saw my chance. Redemption for us both. "Wait," I said, producing the satchel. Proof of shared sins. I laid out select documents, enough to implicate all sides in old crimes, a balance of terror. The officer paled, recognizing names, perhaps his own lineage. Negotiations shifted, the artifacts bartered for extended ceasefire, prisoner releases. But as papers exchanged, a sniper's crack shattered the peace. From the enemy side? Ours, chaos reignited, bodies dropping. I shielded my father, firing into the fray, the uniform my armor. We retreated to cover, Father Nikolai dragging a wounded observer. Jets thundered in response, bombs falling on aggressors, their precision a deafening symphony. In the smoke, my father clutched my arm. "The letter? There's more. Your birth, tied to it all." His words, cryptic, fueled the mystery. We fled again, through back routes, the church crumbling further behind us. The twist deepened. Was my existence a product of that deal? A life born from compromise? Safe in a bunker hours later, wounds tended, the ceasefire reformed under international pressure. My father confessed fully. The deal saved Mama from a camp, but involved overlooking Kovacs' father's escape. Guilt had eaten him, manifesting as mockery to deter me from similar paths. But now, united, we plan to use the maps, arms caches to bolster our side. Yet, as jets patrolled the night sky, thunder echoing over the city, a final revelation loomed, one that would redefine family, war, and the uniform I wore. The bunker was a concrete tomb buried under the weight of the city, its walls damp and echoing with the muffled thunder of jets patrolling the skies above, their engines a constant reminder that peace was as fleeting as the shadows dancing from our flickering lanterns. I sat beside my father, the satchel of documents spread between us like a map of our fractured lineage, the air thick with the scent of mildew and the faint metallic tang of blood from his bandaged shoulder. The uniform I wore, now a second skin scarred by the war's embrace, no longer felt like a burden, but a bridge, connecting his hidden past to my defiant present. Around us, the survivors stirred. Luca sharpening his knife with rhythmic scrapes, Father Nikolai leading a quiet prayer circle, Elena comforting a child whose sobs pierced the gloom. The ceasefire held, brokered in the ruins of St. Michael's, but whispers of resumption slithered through the group like smoke, fueling unease. My father's confession lingered in the stale air, his words from earlier replaying in my mind. The deal that saved Mama, the overlooked escape of Kovacs' father, the guilt that had curdled into mockery of my choice to don the uniform. "It wasn't just to deter you," he admitted now, his voice a hoarse whisper as he traced a finger over the grandfather's letter, its ink faded but indelible. "It was atonement. I thought if I kept you safe, mocked your heroism to keep you home, I'd balance the scales for that one compromise. But war doesn't allow balances, it tips them." I nodded, the anger from before softening into understanding, the pieces of our family puzzle fitting with painful clarity. Yet questions gnawed. What of my birth? How deep did the ties run? As if sensing my turmoil, he continued, his eyes distant, lost in memories. "Your mother, she was in a camp early in the Troubles. Not this war, the skirmishes before. I was young, like you, running messages for the underground. Kovac's father was a guard there, corrupt but human. I traded intel on a minor supply route for her release. It worked, but the guilt, it followed me. When she told me she was pregnant with you, I saw it as redemption, a life from the ashes. But Kovac never forgot. His father vanished after, rumored killed by partisans. He blamed us, waited for revenge. The revelation washed over me like cold river water, chilling yet clarifying. My existence, a direct thread from that deal, a life born of shadow, deals in dark times. The uniform, my enlistment, it wasn't rebellion. It was fate, pulling me into the cycle. Outside, the jet's thunder grew louder, a squadron passing low, shaking dust from the ceiling. Alarms blared faintly, not breach, but alert. Luca rushed in from the entrance tunnel. Enemy scouts spotted. Ceasefire straining. We need to move the artifacts. Use the maps. The grandfather's map, decoded partially by Father Nikolai, pointed to an arms cache nearby, hidden since '45 in an abandoned mine. "We'll go," my father said, struggling to stand. I protested, his wound fresh, but he insisted. "Together, end this chapter." We geared up, a small team, me, Luca, Dragan, arm healing, and my father, pistol in hand. Father Nikolai stayed to guard the bunker, his faith our anchor. Venturing out under cover of dusk, the city a labyrinth of ruins bathed in twilight hues, we navigated cautiously. Jets streaked overhead, their afterburners flaring like comets, enforcing the fragile peace but ready to unleash hell. The streets were ghostly, wind whistling through hollow buildings, occasional patrols forcing us into alleys choked with debris. My father's steps were labored, but his resolve iron. "The mine's entrance is camouflaged," he explained, drawing from grandfather's notes, "under a collapsed bridge." As we approached, memories surged, childhood tales he'd spun as bedtime stories, now revealed as veiled truths. The mockery? A shield, protecting me from this legacy until I was ready. We found the bridge, its arches crumbled into the ravine below, vines claiming the stone. Clearing foliage, we uncovered a rusted grate, the entrance. Descending via rope, the mine swallowed us, air cool and echoing, our flashlights carving paths through darkness. Stalactites dripped, pooling water splashing underfoot. Deeper in, we hit a sealed chamber, the map's X marking crates stacked against walls. Rifles, ammunition, grenades, preserved in oilcloth, relics from another war, now fuel for this one. "This could turn the tide," Luca whispered, awe in his voice. But as we loaded packs, a noise echoed, footsteps, voices. Enemy or scavengers? Tension snapped. We doused lights, hiding behind crates. Figures emerged, 3 men, armed, speaking in hushed tones. One's voice familiar. A neighbor turned informant? They searched, beams sweeping. "The old man said it's here," one growled. Old man Kovac? But he was dead. His dying words through Elena, warnings or misdirection. A scuffle ensued. They spotted us. Gunfire erupted, bullets ricocheting off rock. I fired back, the uniform's pockets heavy with ammo. Luca took a graze, Dragan covered. My father, despite pain, shot true, felling one. In the chaos, he shouted, "Marco, the detonator, grandfather's trap." I spotted it, a wired box on a crate, primed explosives, a failsafe against thieves. I triggered it, yelling, "Run!" We scrambled out as blasts thundered, the chamber collapsing behind, burying the intruders and sealing the cache partially. Smoke billowed, but we'd salvaged enough. Emerging into night, jets roaring in response to the explosion, mistaking it for breach. Sirens wailed, but we slipped away back to the bunker. There, safe, my father collapsed, wound reopened. Medics worked as he gripped my hand. "The mockery ends here. You're the hero I couldn't be." Tears mixed with relief. The arms bolstered our lines, the documents secured for posterity. But echoes remained, my birth's tie to treason's threads, redemption in action. As ceasefire solidified, jets thundering one last pass over the church ruins, now a symbol. The story circled to closure, father and son redeemed under war's unforgiving sky. The arms from the mine cache were distributed swiftly in the bunker's dim confines, rifles oiled and gleaming under the harsh bulb light. Ammunition clips passed hand to hand like sacred relics, each one a promise of defiance against the encroaching night. My father rested against the wall, his breathing steadier now with the medic's care, the color returning to his cheeks as he watched me load my weapon. The uniform on my frame no longer a jest, but a symbol of our shared resolve. The jet's distant rumble filtered through the earth above, a guardian's vigil that both comforted and unnerved, their thunder a harbinger of what was to come. Luca coordinated the dispersal, his voice clipped and efficient, while Father Nikolai blessed the weapons with holy water sprinkled from a canteen, his prayers a murmur weaving through the tension. Elena gathered the civilians, preparing for evacuation to safer lines, her eyes meeting mine with a nod of quiet strength. The ceasefire stretched thin, reports trickling in of enemy buildups, the city holding its breath for the inevitable crack. I approached my father, kneeling to adjust his bandage, the fabric rough under my fingers, stained but holding. "We use these to push back," I said, gesturing to the crates. "End it here." He nodded, his hand clasping my shoulder, the grip firm despite the pain. But first the church, one last stand. The documents, we deliver them to command. Expose the truths, break the cycle. The plan formed, a small squad to return to St. Michael's ruins, retrieve any remaining vault items if possible, then rendezvous with allies under jet cover. It was risky, the area a hot zone but necessary. My birth's tie to the past fueled me. A life from compromise, now turning the tide toward justice. We set out at midnight, the group splitting, civilians to the hills, us to the heart of the storm. The streets were a gauntlet of shadows, moonlight filtering through skeletal buildings, the air crisp with autumn's bite and the ever-present smoke. Jets patrolled in formation, their lights winking like stars fallen to earth, thunder echoing off hills as they banked. We moved silently, rifles at ready, my father at the rear, insisting on covering our flank. Memories assaulted me, his mockery ringing in my ears, now silenced by truth. "You look like a fool," he'd said. But now I saw it as love twisted by fear, a father's desperate shield. We neared the church, its silhouette haunting, the spire's stump an accusatory finger against the sky. Allied sentries waved us through, the perimeter tense, whispers of imminent attack. Inside the ruins, the nave opened to the stars, we dug through debris to the altar. The trapdoor, warped but intact, yielded to the key. Below, the vault held surprises. More letters, a journal, grandfather's own, detailing the purges, the mercies, the debts. Kovach's name repeated, a vendetta chronicled. "This ends it," my father whispered, pocketing the journal. But as we ascended, alarms blared, enemy breach. Gunfire erupted, shadows swarming the walls. We fought back, positions in the rubble, bullets whining past. Luca fell wounded, Dragan dragging him to cover. I fired methodically, the uniform's camouflage blending with stone, each shot a release of pent rage. My father joined the fray, pistol barking, his face fierce. "For family!" he shouted, downing an assailant. But numbers overwhelmed. Radio crackled. "Air support inbound, hold!" The jet's thunder built, a crescendo shaking the ground. They streaked in low, afterburners roaring, missiles launching at enemy lines. Explosions bloomed, lighting the night, the church trembling. In the chaos, a figure charged, enemy officer, the same from negotiations, eyes wild. He aimed at my father. I leaped, tackling him, rifle butt smashing down. We wrestled, his knife grazing my side, blood warm. Father fired, ending it. As jets thundered directly overhead, their shadows sweeping the ruins, the assault broke, enemies retreating in disarray. We stood amid the smoke, father and son, the mockery dissolved in shared victory. The documents secure, the past redeemed. But wounds ran deep, my side bleeding, his shoulder reopened. Allies arrived, medevac choppers whirring. As we were lifted out, the church below fading, jets escorting. I gripped his hand. "No more secrets," he smiled faintly. "No more." The war raged on, but for us, a chapter closed. Thunder over the church sealing bonds reforged in fire. The chopper blades thumped above us, a relentless heartbeat carrying us away from the smoldering ruins of St. Michael's. The church's shattered silhouette fading into the haze as Sarajevo sprawled below, a wounded city cradling its scars under the watchful eyes of circling jets. I gripped my father's hand, his fingers cold but steady, the journal and documents secured in the satchel pressed against my chest, their weight heavier than any rifle I'd carried. My uniform, torn and bloodied, clung to me like a testament, no longer the fool's costume he'd mocked, but a banner of our shared redemption. The wound in my side throbbed, a shallow cut from the enemy officer's knife, but the pain felt distant, overshadowed by the clarity that had emerged from the chaos. The thunder of those jets over the church had been more than a military strike. It was the sound of truth breaking free, of a father's guilt laid bare, of a son's defiance forged into purpose. As we flew toward the Allied base, the city's fires flickering like dying stars, I realized this story wasn't just ours. It was a mirror for anyone who's ever faced the crucible of war and found themselves staring into the abyss of their own choices. War strips you down to bone and soul, revealing what you'll sacrifice, what you'll protect, and what you'll become when the world demands it. My father mocked my uniform to shield me from his shadows, from a legacy of deals and debts that stretched back to my grandfather's blood-soaked hands. But in the ruins of St. Michael's, under the roar of jets and the weight of secrets, we found each other, not just as father and son, but as comrades bound by a truth that war couldn't bury. The documents we saved, those brittle pages of names and sins, weren't just relics. They were a warning, a reminder that history's wounds fester when left in the dark. They named collaborators, mapped hidden arms, told stories of mercy and betrayal that could shift the tides of this war or the next. And my birth? A spark from a desperate bargain, a life born from compromise that became a vow to break the cycle. Every shot I fired, every step through those tunnels, every moment I stood beside my father was a defiance of that mockery, a declaration that courage isn't in the uniform alone, but in the choices we make when the world is burning. You followed me through this darkness, through the smoke and gunfire, to a truth that cuts deeper than any blade. You've walked with me through the streets of a city under siege, felt the tremble of the earth as jets thundered overhead, and heard the whispers of a family's hidden past. That takes courage, not the kind that holds a rifle, but the kind that dares to look at the raw, unfiltered reality of war and the human heart. You're part of a select few who've stayed until the end, who've faced the weight of a story that doesn't shy away from the ugliness or the hope. For that, I honor you. You're not just watching, you're bearing witness, joining a community that seeks to understand the voices that rise from the ashes of conflict, voices too often silenced by time or fear. Now I ask you to carry this story forward. In the comments below, share what this journey meant to you. Write, "This story changed the way I see war." Those words aren't just a statement, they're a pledge, a signal that you're one of us, committed to uncovering the truths that shape our world, no matter how painful. By commenting, you're weaving yourself into a tapestry of listeners who refuse to let these stories fade, who believe that every life, every sacrifice deserves to be remembered. And don't stop there, share this video. Let it ripple out, reaching others who need to hear the echoes of St. Michael's, who need to know that war is more than headlines. It's the heartbeat of fathers and sons, of secrets buried and unearthed. Sharing isn't just a click. It's a spark lighting the way for others to find these truths, to confront the fragility of life and the resilience of the human spirit. Subscribe to this channel. Become a guardian of these stories, like the priests who hid relics under stone, like the jets that thundered to protect a city's soul. Each video here is a door into the human condition, a glimpse into the chaos and courage that define us. Keep watching, keep questioning, keep seeking the disturbing, the real, the human. Because in the end, war isn't just fought on battlefields. It's fought in the choices we make, the truths we face, and the stories we dare to tell. Let's keep those stories alive together, under the thunder of a world that never stops turning.